Welcome back to my channel, guys. I'm excited to share yet another interview with you, this time with iconic adult star Adam Keith. Now, you might remember him as Adam Russo. He goes by both names. Adam Keith is now the name that he uses professionally to promote his tarot work. He's a tarot reader, and I'll actually put his YouTube channel in the comment section if you want to check out his work and what he's all about. During this conversation, we talked about everything from being a gay man at the height of the AIDS epidemic, to how he got started in the adult space, and of course where he is now with current projects and how he delved into what's called light work, specifically with tarot, that he's kind of delved into this more spiritual direction. Hope you guys enjoy this one. As always, let me know in the comments what you think. What I like to start off with is the coming out story, right? Obviously, a huge part of the reason that I wanted to talk to you is because my channel is all about gay content, gay stories for gay people from a gay person, right? But I also want to now include other gay voices. So before we talk about tarot, before we talk about the adult space, I'm curious what your process was like with coming out. What are you willing to share?
Okay.
And so on.
I was actually one of the lucky ones, I have to say, because, well, lucky in some ways. When I started realizing my sexuality, I realized at a very early age, but I did not come out to anybody. I remember for having, now this is way before the internet or anything else. So when we found anything that was sort of adult in content, it was paper. And we would find those things somewhere. I don't remember where I found this stuff, but I had this like rug under right next to my nightstand that I put on there. And on the other side of the rug was all these pictures of men. Some of them just in bathing suits, others naked. And they're like little tiny squares of men, right? And I must have cut them out of like magazines that I found somewhere, because some of them were adult. And I remember masturbating to them. And it was weird because I thought, oh, I really want to be these guys. Like I want to be like these guys.
Yes.
And then it dawned on me one day is that not only do I want to like look like them, but I want to like be with them.
Mm.
Like I want to touch them. I want to feel them.
So this is
So
you as a teenager, I'm assuming.
yeah,
Okay.
this was like age, I'm gonna say 14, 15, something like that. I had crushes on girls and boys,
Okay.
and I've had sex with women and whatnot, but that was the first time that I actually realized, huh, you're gay.
Oh, that's so interesting.
So I didn't come out to anybody else at that
Yeah.
point. I waited, I got through high school. I was dating girls just because it was easier, but knew that was very much more interested in men. In fact, I did a hooked up with some guys on the street corners. Yeah, I was one of those. Yeah, I did.
Oh, wow.
15 years old, like right outside my house.
At
Daisy Dukes on
15?
and a tank at 15.
Where was this, by the way?
This was in Hazleton, Pennsylvania, which is the Poconos of Pennsylvania.
Poconos. I know the
My
Poconos.
my parents had divorced and my mom moved back to where she was from. And it was a hot summer day. And I'm 15 and I'm horny. And I remember the first guy that picked me up was the pizza delivery boy. And Italian guy, and he's like, "Oh, so where are you going?" Now my house is right there. Oh, I said, I don't know, no, whatever.
Around.
We drive down the hill, go into a parking lot, and we're both sitting there, right? And he's young too. He's probably maybe late teens, and he just starts then unzipping his cock is like all hard, and I just immediately any nervousness vanished, totally gone. I was down on him. Didn't take him too long to come, and then he drove me back to the place. Um, that was fun. When I actually came out, it was right at my senior
Wait, hold
year
on.
of
You
high
can't
school.
you can't you can't just
Like,
let
wait, you
that
can't
go.
stop.
I'm still processing this story that you're 15 years old and you're like, I'm just gonna try it, and it worked. These stories are always so fascinating to me because I think, just like with the magazines that you were mentioning, right? A different era, so you have to rely on different cues, right? Like,
Yeah.
and this is something that I struggle with personally. I feel like I'm so used to using apps to know exactly who's into me and who I'm into,
Right.
that I fear that I'm part of a generation, and you know, the younger guys too, Gen Z too, right? Where we don't have that same developed cue in person of picking up on
Yeah.
chemistry.
Yeah.
So that's one thing, but the fact that you at 15 were just hanging out on the street corner like I'm waiting to get picked up and it worked is crazy to me. And that makes me think, in addition to, you know, all the guys that I've seen in porn, all the guys that I've seen on apps, it makes me think how many guys around me would be down to go, you know, ready to go that I would never otherwise think so. That's fascinating.
Right. Yeah, it was a whole different time. I mean, there were no apps, there was no internet. I mean, literally, the internet only existed as far as the military was concerned. That was it.
Mm,
And so nobody knew any of this. You had to go out and everything was tactile. You had to meet people, you
mm,
had to see people. And so you're relying on those visual clues with people because like on an app, you can find out a lot more information. You can see if they're a bottom, a top,
right.
you have no fucking clue when you're especially at a bar or something who that person is. But I'll say when I'm in a bar or like even in a room full of people, I can pretty much sense their energy already. I can see if I want to like actually find that a person attractive or not. And it's a lot of other clues, not just the way they look, how they handle themselves. If I get close enough, how they speak. It's like it's all of these visual and sound cues that
Yeah.
you get when you're in person that you cannot get from a photo.
Yeah.
You cannot get from like what someone's written. And
Intuition, chemistry.
yeah, absolutely. Even for pheromones, when you get close enough someone person, the pheromones, especially if you're in a gay bar and like what they're putting off, that's a lot of it too. People have done a lot of studies on that as well. That does exist. So you're talking about multiple layers of things that you just don't quite get with these, you know.
Yeah. So you're 15 years old, this happens, and you're like, it breaks the seal, I'm assuming.
Well, it got. I mean, it was a blowjob, but to me, that still counts as sex. So yes, it
Yeah.
did break that. We didn't, fuck. But and I didn't fuck for quite a while because at the time I was also coming out, like realizing all this. AIDS was hitting the front newsstand,
Okay.
and that really put a damper on my sexuality for quite a while and with most people. And thank God I was younger because if I had been older at the time and had come out earlier, I may not be here with you today because I'm a very sexual person.
Mm.
So that may not have worked out very well. But it just kind of put the fear in God into a lot of us. And so we adjusted our life differently.
Yeah.
So we weren't going out in the bathhouses and we weren't going out and, anal work has, or anal, I didn't do for quite a while. Like it was more oral, and if it was condom, and I had pretty much was a top most of my life, and that was also because of the whole AIDS crisis. Like
Oh,
that did really influence a lot of how I thought of sex. It just changed everything, and not just for me, but for a whole load of other gay men. It just because we knew people that were dying. Like when I was in Philadelphia, when I was out of high school, you saw people with, the lesions and everything else. These people
wow.
were advanced, AIDS. And you can't get that out of your mind.
Yeah.
It's like it's there. Um, yeah, I'm just hoping that we don't have another something coming up, like with the superbug, which are already coming into existence, that also affects our community. I just
Yeah.
because there's so much sex now. Every party is a sex party. It's like boom, 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 boom. Like I'm just hoping that does not happen again. That's all. Because we're going to extremes again.
Well, so I agree with you. And then I think about like the PrEP phenomenon, right? That because
Right.
of PrEP, so years ago I lived in New York City and I went to the doctor for a regular checkup, and you know they ask you like, do you have sex with men? Do you have sex with women? And then that affects the rest of the conversation, right? Based on what they want to tell you.
Yeah.
And this doctor was like, "Are you on PrEP?" I said, "No." The doctor said, "You should get on it because uh, A, you're gay, but and having sex with men. But in this doctor that I went to see, this was in Hell's Kitchen, right, which is currently kind of like the gay mecca of New York City.
Hmm.
And she was saying since the introduction of PrEP, HIV diagnoses have significantly decreased, right? But
Right,
interestingly,
right.
she said everything else has skyrocketed back up, like syphilis. She was telling me syphilis
Mhm.
was thought to be kind of a dying out STD. Now a lot of
Yeah,
these have come back because instead of using PrEP as a preventative aid, like
right.
as an extra tool on in addition to let's say condoms, right? Instead, a lot of gay men are using PrEP as a tool to be even more sort of reckless in their
Yeah, yeah.
sex life. So I'm curious if you have any thoughts on that. That was my first thought when you mentioned this idea of potentially a second sort of phase of an epidemic coming, a sexual epidemic coming.
Yeah, yeah. It's again, it was much more difficult because when I started, my process of getting more agreeable with my sexuality happened in San Francisco. I had a partner there, but we had opened up our relationship, and it was getting and feeling comfortable having sex more freely. And with guys that were HIV positive, they were undetectable at the time, which was not a big deal. There was still no PrEP on the market at that point.
Mm.
Um, and then I started filming that because it was all condom at the time. And as we went into bareback and that, we had started getting PrEP. There was really barely getting an STD. Like I barely ever got an STD, considering how many people had having sex with on film, and I was also escorting too at the time. And then as the PrEP idea started to grow and infiltrate gay men's medicine cabinets, um, other diseases like that would start popping up a little more rapidly. Oh, I got chlamydia now. I got gonorrhea now. Great. And then the Just for Fans hit, and the OnlyFans hit. And then every time I was filming, it was like I mean, I go to the doctor every 3 months. I fucking have something. I was like, okay, this is fucking ridiculous now. This is crazy.
And
It just
you're saying because I'm assuming what you're saying is that with the OnlyFans era, people are kind of doing it on their own. So there's no studio backing requiring you to get tested. Is that what you're implying?
but it's not even just that because these boys, even if they were getting again, testing is like, if you're doing studio testing, yeah, they test you at that moment, but you remember you still have a period of like 7 to 10 days if you had before that you might still have something. So it's not exactly foolproof, and that's just for the porn. But people are just they're going out and having sex all the time. So that's what I mean. It's the frequency of the sex is
Okay.
more. The amount of
Hmm.
people they're having sex with is more. Like I don't. The funny thing is, even though I've done all this porn and everything else, and I've been in this for a decade and a half, I'm with my own personal sexual energy. I'm a little bit more reserved. Like
Hmm.
I don't need to stick my dick in everybody's hole, and I don't need everybody's dick in my hole.
Yeah.
Like, I just don't. And so, but some people, that's just their goal. Fuck as many people as they can.
That's really
um,
interesting because that's a stereotype, right? That like all porn stars are just like they're just naturally slutty or whatever, which is maybe the case for some, but for a whole lot of others, I guess they compartmentalize like this is a business. This is the way that I'm making money. I don't see
yeah.
this as intimacy. It's
Mhm.
purely a show, right? I'm assuming.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a lot of show to it. It's like even when I'm doing for my own fans page, because I don't do studio stuff anymore. I've done a lot of it. Don't want to do it anymore. So there's no point to it. But even when the camera is on and I'm into the guy because we get to choose who we want to, film with, you always know there's someone there or a tripod or whatever it may be that's being recorded. So it's still in the back of your mind because okay, when you're with somebody personally and they're like kind of whispering your ear or something, whatever it may be, that doesn't translate to the camera. Doesn't translate to the camera. So you have to realize that this is still part of a performance.
Yeah.
So a lot of times, if I'm filming with the guy and we're having, we had a good time, we filmed, and then usually if they don't not going anywhere, they don't need to go anywhere, they stay and we wind up fucking again, and it's much more intimate. It's much more
Oh,
arousing for me.
interesting.
Yeah.
Wait, how often would you say that I'm just curious, like percentage wise.
Um, quite a bit. I would say a good
Really?
70% of the time.
Wow.
Yeah.
And you think that's because there's a chemistry there that you want to explore without the cameras?
Exactly, exactly. Because I think, with the cameras, I'm like certain positions, moving around, trying to get stuff that looks good for the camera. But when I'm fucking a guy, especially if I have more back, if I can get him to anal orgasm, that's great. And sometimes I can do that filming, but it's a little bit different without the camera. And that's what I'm going for. And vice versa, if they're fucking me, it's just more intimate. It's just because there's nobody else but the two of us.
Yeah.
Or if it's a three-way, there'll be the three of us. But yeah,
Huh.
it's really weird that way. And I don't know if I'm the only one. I don't know. I can't voice that for anybody else, but for me, that's kind of what happens.
Well, if it happens 70% of the time, I'm assuming it's not just you, right? Well, I'm curious. Okay, we're like talk we keep going in so many different directions, but all this is so fascinating. I'm taking notes to like remember to come back to things.
Right. That's okay.
I'm curious in the studio days, back when you did studio films, did that ever happen too, that right after you guys would go off, like you and whatever partner, or has this only been since this
No.
OnlyFans era that that's something that
Yeah.
you
It's
explore?
it's only for the fans pages. Because
That's
when you're
interesting.
shooting for studio, even a lower budget like Treasure Island, which just is basically the camera that you just go at it and the cameraman, goes around us. Studio films like Raging Stallion, Titan Media, all the Lucas, that was a whole different thing. You had all these lights, you had all these camera
Production.
people. It was production. You had your stills first. You had it's a whole friggin' production. And afterwards, after you're done with all of this, you're kind of the last thing you want to do is like kind of get
Got
intimate
it.
again because you've just been it's being on a porn set is the very unsexy thing. It really is. I don't care how like the guy's hot, whatnot. Hopefully, you might have chemistry, but the environment is not sexy.
Got it.
It's just not.
But that's interesting because you said that the OnlyFans environment is still artificial because there's a third party there, even if it's just a camera. But I guess you're saying
Slightly.
it's a lot closer to reality of sex.
It's a closer you're going to get to reality. It's the same thing with the Treasure Island. It's the closest thing you're going to get a little bit more to the reality of it. It's like when it's the observation thing in science. Like once something's observed, it changes because it's being observed. It's a
Ah,
scientific term. And that's kind of very true with the camera porn.
this reminds me of in traditional media, uh, like a scripted show, and then today's version is the reality show because that feels more real,
Yeah,
but
reality.
it's still not totally real, but it's obviously more real than a totally scripted show.
Right, right.
There and then what you just said is this. So I watch a lot of reality TV, which is maybe why my mind went there because I watch a lot of trash TV. But this same phenomenon that you're talking about, that oftentimes the first season is the most raw, the most real.
Mhm.
After that, the cast is too self-aware because they watch themselves back and now they have fans. Very
Right,
interesting
right.
phenomenon that you're, and I'm sure it's the same with adult stars that maybe like the best uh I'm generalizing here, but I'm thinking a lot of adult stars, maybe their first films are like the best because it's the most organic they're ever going to be on camera, maybe like the most, even just that like nervousness of no.
Yeah, but sometimes that backfires because they're nervous. May not be performing properly. They may have a hard time getting hard. And this is before a lot of people were using Trimix, injectables of that. So
Wait. Try
and
mix. Oh my God.
you don't know.
We're,
Come
we're gonna
on, you know Trimix.
this is gonna be like a part three, a three-part trilogy interview. No, I have no idea what that means. I know what a
Trimix,
fluffer is.
no, the fluffer. They didn't have those when I was starting to do that. I think that was more during the 70s and 80s. But the Trimix is an injectable shot into your dick. What it does is stimulate. You're like, ah. It's a very small needle. And what it does, you hit there's two shafts running down your penis. Okay. So you got to get the drug into one of those shafts. So you have to sort of, it's where you have to be very kind of precise where you're shooting your dick and where at the base of it, et cetera. But once you do, and it gets in there, it stimulates the cells in that wall to expand. So unlike Viagra, where you still need to be sexually up here in your mind, when that's localized, you could be at a funeral, and you're gonna be hard. So it's a
So,
no mess, no kind of thing. Just like, there we go.
so it's Viagra on steroids.
Kinda, yeah.
Wow. Okay, so I'm still not over this story at 15. But so that happens, and then yeah, you were saying that the AIDS epidemic is front and center, and obviously that makes total sense. I've thought about this before, that it must have put a lot of gay men in limbo, where suddenly their coming of age or their self-discovery gets paused.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah,
and by the way, I'm a millennial, so I had it easier, but I still grew up in the 90s with this awareness of like many gay men grow up to have AIDS and to die of it. So I can only
right.
imagine the generation that was in the thick of it, the
Yeah.
trauma that does to you, especially because you're isolated, right? If you're just growing up and you're keeping this to yourself, that makes it even worse. It would be one thing if like you can be openly gay and you can talk about this with your family, but then the shame element on top of it is awful.
Well, I didn't feel like I needed to come out to the world at the time when I did. It was like, yeah, was it? I mean, being gay wasn't exactly the best thing. Let's put it still in that way. Like I wasn't going out to the bathhouse or looking in parks for sex. I mean, I did occasionally pick up a guy in his car, but I digress. But it did happen. I'm not like, and I did go to a bookstore once in Philadelphia as well, or maybe a couple times. But again, just to suck dick.
Mm,
Like fucking was like really off limits then. It just and thankfully I'm not sure if I knew that was the cause because everything was still up in the air. Nobody really knew exactly how people were getting it, et cetera,
right.
et cetera. But it just seemed like it was not a good idea. And now that we know, actually, sucking dick is actually safer
Hmm.
than, I mean, unless you have bloody teeth and everything else,
Right.
than having anal. So I guess I was on point with that. It just felt instinctively right. I came out to my mom just at the end of high school, just about ready to graduate. And I took her out for some coffee at Denny's because there was no Starbucks at the time either. Um, or at least there was in Seattle, but I digress. But anyway, so and I said to her, she's like, and I said, "No, mom, I'm gay." And she's like, "Oh." She said, "Well, you know what's happening," which meaning the AIDS crisis at the time. And I said, "Mom, I know, I'm fine, I'm safe." And then we started talking about each other's boyfriends. Well, I did have a boyfriend at that point, like very little. And we just started talking about that. And then the funny thing is, she told my stepfather, and the next morning he comes down and he said, "Oh, it's all cool. I have a gay friend." And I'm like, and we just had breakfast. That was it. That was the bad extent of my coming out.
That's a
It's a
pretty
very
good
cool
coming
thing.
out story.
It's a very easy one because I know a lot of people have had very difficult times and it's been very difficult. The mother, the father, the whole thing, the breakdown. Mine was extremely easy, and I'm very thankful for that.
So take me through the process of, okay, you come out, now you're living your life, you're an adult. How did you get into it? How did you get into adult entertainment?
Well, I was asked many, many moons ago in New York to do porn. Now, at that time, I've been a fashion designer, interior designer, product designer, fine artist. I've been bartending between those things because as a young designer, you don't make much money, especially in New York. And so you had to, figure out ways to make ends meet. So I would have like scouts basically say, "Hey, if you ever want to do porn, blah, blah, blah." And I was like, "Okay, we're not living in the world we're living in now where everybody has a Just for Fans
Yeah.
account pretty much." And I said, "Oh, no, 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 no. Hey, like I'm going to be a famous designer or whatever the fuck I was going to be at the time." And
Wait, how are they
so I said,
finding
"No,
you? Is this at a bar?
just at a bar. I'm working at the bar.
All right,
They're just
okay.
finding me, just there." Um, and so when me and my partner went to San Francisco, I was doing fine art and I was also bartending in Castro, and the economy took a turn. And the bar I was working at did some fucked up things, so that went down. My income went down. So people were getting fired at jobs that I recently held, interior design, all those kind of things. So I'm like, okay, what am I going to do? We need more money. And I thought to myself, well, maybe I could escort. And I started asking my friends, and even kidding with my friends and my partner at the time, if things don't improve, I may have to escort, just to sort of see the reaction to it.
Hmm.
Little did they know I was actually seriously considering it. So I finally went to my partner and said, listen, I really think that I should escort. Like, I'm going to try it. And he's like, begrudgingly said yes. And I get it. But at this point, we were barely having, so we weren't having sex. In fact, I think we might have been sleeping in separate bedrooms at this point.
Huh.
And I said, okay. And the first night I went out, I got hit up by this guy, and he's like, it was downtown San Francisco. We were living in Pacifica. Drove down there. I got in, sat on the couch, had a glass of wine with him. We talked a little bit, went to his bedroom. He gave me a full massage, blew me, and then that was it, and gave me money. And I'm like, okay, I feel like I must be paying him.
Yeah.
Because I
Were
got
you
wine,
were
I got a
you
massage.
were you attracted to him physically, sexually?
Um, not particularly like, I mean, he was an older guy. He was in fairly good shape in that, but I was like, oh, was I attracted to him? No, but it was the idea of the whole thing that kind of got me going, of like him wanting to be there with me in that sense. I got back in the car, and then immediately I had another text come in. Now, I am not Adam Russo by this point. Nobody knows who the
Right.
fuck I am. I've never done a porn yet. And this guy was not too far away. I went to go see him. It was this black guy, and he was so happy to see me, like ecstatically happy to see me. But again, I'm not Adam Russo, so I don't know where all this ecstaticism is coming from. And he didn't last that long. He kind of even just dry fucked me. He didn't even insert. Gave me more money than I initially told him what the hour was. And so I came up with this wad of money, and I was like, yeah, I think we can do this.
Mm.
And then I started to say, well, if I'm going to do this, I need to promote myself. And so I decided to do the porn. And Titan Studios is the first studio I worked with. And only because I had contacted them, but they contacted me only because someone did not show up for a shoot. Someone
Mm.
didn't make the plane. And so it was just the right timing.
Huh.
And I got on there, and I did several with them and other studios, and just sort of mushroomed into, well, a decade and a half of doing this. So
So it was
that was
actually
it.
originally intended to then help you make more money from escorting.
Right. Right.
Right.
And it did because it gave me more exposure. And then when I was traveling the world, I would go to different cities I knew would film. They said, hey, I'm here. Let me know if you want to film or not. So they would pay me money. They were glad to have me because they didn't have to pay for my airfare or anything else. I
Mm.
was already there, but they were already paying me
Smart.
and PR for me as well. Because remember, there was no Just for Fans or OnlyFans yet.
What you mentioned about escorting, I totally get why that would be a source of uh arousal, to be
Mhm.
like, I'm offering this, that you're watching somebody get excited and like their walls come down if they start nervous. So I
Yeah.
totally get that. But I imagine that with that, the double-edged sword there is also because of the anonymity, that there's also, I would be terrified of, like, out of the first 100 guys, one of these might be a psycho. I mean, was that a part of it for you, or were you like, I can assess this, or we'll
Well,
meet on the street corner first, or
yeah, I mean, that could have happened to me on the street corner at age 15 too. So, you
true.
know.
And now you're getting paid for it at least.
It's like, life is
Yeah.
always a risk, of course.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I think there's some very odd people that I had run into. I had some very odd experiences that I would not like to repeat.
Mhm.
But for the most part, and then this one also too, I don't do a lot of alcohols. In fact, I don't do alcohols at all anymore. So you come to me, you come to my hotel, you come to my
Ah.
like wherever. I don't do alcohols anymore because I don't know what I'm walking into. And I've had some very odd experiences.
I'm curious how often your experience in porn affects these situations with guys that are interested in you, whether it's dating or just sex. Like, I'm assuming a lot of them, it's actually like a fetish. They recognize you. And what is your take on that? When I talked to Antonio Biaggi, he was like, I love it because I get to have sex with guys who otherwise maybe would never want to have sex with me. But I imagine that that might also get more painful if you actually want to date them and you're like, are they just fetishizing me?
Like you start talking and then we're making out afterwards. They're like, yeah, I know who you are. And I'm like, Yeah, so you have this fetishizing of it, which is not bad. Like I don't mind when people come up to me in the street and want to get a photo. I think that's lovely. It's I never expect anybody to know who I am. But you know,
How often does that
sometimes
happen, by the way, out of curiosity? How often do you get recognized on the street?
it's happened quite a bit. Even here in Argentina, I was at a bar twice, two different bars, people coming up to me, two different places coming up, say, "Oh, can I take a photo of you?" I'm like, "Yeah, sure." I've been stopped on the streets in Times Square. I've been stopped in the streets when I was in Thailand, just walking down the street. This Indian boy stops me. Like, are you on? So it does happen quite frequently. Airlines, if I'm like at the airport, if I'm like, sometimes the airline, server will know me. It's weird because wherever country I've gone to, people have stopped me. But you got to remember, it's a global. We're dealing with
Yeah,
porn is global
the
now.
internet. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's all over the place, and I'm always flattered because again, I don't really expect anybody to notice me.
To your point about you got into porn to actually self-promote for the
Mhm.
escorting, I'm wondering then how you feel about this current era of OnlyFans and that it's all about self-promotion and you're in control of your content, you have the rights to it. What do you make of this evolution? I know you mentioned earlier you would never you're done with the studios. Uh,
Right, right.
and actually, I'm curious too why you feel so strongly about that. Is it because of the content ownership angle? Is the pages better when you're doing it on your own?
It's not to work for studios now because the studios were great to work for when there wasn't OnlyFans just fans. Like I said, they were paying for your PR and they were giving me some like airline ticket, whatever it may be, depending on which studio you worked for. Some paid more than others. But now at this point, I already have a name. And what they're paying, like even say Raging Stallion, they're like, "Oh, can you do the scene?" And I'm like, "How much are you paying?" And I'm like, They want me to go get tested, so I have to go drive now out to the valley to get tested. So this is all about hours, time. I look at time. Time is money, and then I got to fly out to Vegas, and then we're gonna sit and do a shoot, which may be about 12 hours, maybe. And I'm like, and I'm adding up the hours, going, no.
Just a lot of headaches. Interesting.
It's not worth the time and money because I don't need the PR.
I did see on your YouTube channel that tarot is a passion of yours and um they call it light work, right? In this space. So I'm curious how you got into that. I'm not surprised remotely that you're into it because you're a talker like I am, and every tarot reader I've ever been to is very verbose. Uh, so can you tell me more about that? And, oh, by the way, I feel like I don't know what it is about gay men. I feel like gay men always love mysticism, astrology, tarot.
Well, I think it's because, I mean, usually the women also go into those realms too, more so than straight men do.
Yes.
So we have that, and I think it's because we tend to be, have those uh, feelings for it. Again, like we're talking about the masculine and the feminine. You
Mhm.
need to balance those. You have both in you, but you will be either one or the other. And that's with the relationship, especially whether they're straight, lesbian, gay, whatever, does not matter. There should always be one more with the masculine energy, one with the feminine energy, because you need to balance that relationship as well. How I got into it was a dark night of the soul. It was a breakup with my past partner, the first time that he broke up with me. And I went through a whole dark night of the soul. It was very difficult. It was a trial by fire. I mean, literally for 3 months, I was a walking zombie. I could not sleep any more than 3 hours a night. I tried drinking wine. I tried Percocet. I tried marijuana. I tried all three one night,
Ooh.
up at 3 hours. And I lost weight. I was going through a whole thing. But instead of going to drugs and alcohol, that I started going more into the spirituality. I had a reader that I was then relying on. I had gotten like, I would get two reads a year, one around my birthday, one around the new year. And I used him, and he was kind of my therapist to get
Mm.
me through this, talking me off the ledge, basically. And that's what I do also for others now as well, other light workers that are going through that same experience. Because it's a very, 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 very difficult process because everything needs to be broken down. You're looking within, you're breaking down your ego, the everything that you thought, things that you've seen after a while that you just can't unsee
Mm.
or go back. There's no way of going back. Like we've experienced too much. And so then you understand and you start flowing with the universe and start working with it instead of against it. And I'm seeing it all around around the world, through friends, through what's going on politically. Everything is, and everything being exposed, which is also the
Yes,
thing too, which
totally.
is part of this process because people need to friggin' see what's going on.
Yeah.
And still people have blinders on.
Yeah.
But that's the thing, is the universe will shake you up and shake you up until you get it. In fact, sometimes it'll slap you around because it's like, wake up, idiot. Like,
I
and you have free
totally
will.
I totally agree with you that the past 5 to 10 years, there's been more and more societal awakening and
Yeah.
masks being ripped off.
Yeah.
Whether it's a Harvey Weinstein thing, whether it's Trump,
And it's hard for people to see the truth because they believed in something for so long
yes, conditioning, yeah,
that it's hard to sort of let that go.
yeah, yeah, unlearning. Unlearning is harder than learning.
Yeah.
Thanks again for being open to this.
All right, Kevin. You take care of
Thank you so
yourself. Talk to
much.
you later. All right, buddy.
Bye.
Ciao.